Your Japanese is unnatural, and it takes you forever to get it out. The reason for that, though, might partially be because you've never actually thought about thoughts. I'm not just trying to be philosophical here either. From an experiential point of view, thoughts aren't actually in English or in Japanese at first. You vocalize thoughts and ideas already in your head and call that thinking. But the thoughts and ideas actually exist for you before or separate from that vocalization. I'm not being mystical or anything. You can test this for yourself. Imagine yourself going to the store to buy some bread. Can you do that without actually vocalizing it as, I'm going to the store to buy bread? Of course you can. The thought, I'm going to the store to buy bread exists in your head before you vocalize it or visualize the action. It's just kind of there. It's almost not even temporal, at least not until you grab onto it through vocalization or visualization. Even when you see it in your head without words, you don't have to go through the steps in your head of putting on your shoes, going out the door, walking to the store, finding the bread, etc. You have that idea in your head in full before, during, and after vocalizing or imagining it. You have a singular idea at this single moment, almost like an object of, I'm going to the store to buy bread. So why does this matter, and how is it related to your struggles with speaking Japanese or whatever language you're working on? Well, a mistake that language learners make in the beginning stages of language learning, and may never stop making, is first taking that object, the idea in their head, and vocalizing it in their native language. They then try to translate that vocalization into whatever language they're learning. This leads to all kinds of problems. First, if you're a native English speaker, the English you're able to use is almost definitely more advanced than any of the Japanese you know. So, what do? What many people do is run to a dictionary and try to convert every word that they just vocalized in English into the language they're learning. But what if you had vocalized our earlier idea as, I'm gonna run to the store and pick up bread? It means exactly the same thing as the original, right? But we vocalized it in our head differently this time, using common English expressions. So what your average language learner does is try to translate that directly into Japanese. Maybe you don't do it, but you might be shocked how many people try to find the Japanese for gonna run instead of going to, and pick up bread instead of buying it. But a direct translation of that to Japanese will be a disaster. It'll sound like you literally run to the store on foot, then pick up the bread in your hand, and then that's it. Why did you run to the store? Why did you pick up the loaf of bread and then do nothing? So many unanswered questions. Let's try something a little more roundabout. Could you say our earlier idea in English, but much simpler, while still preserving the main point? Give me some examples in the comments. For the purpose of this video, if we just said, I will buy bread, is this understandable? If you're at home and say that, does the person listening to you understand that you're gonna go somewhere and buy bread, just like in the original sentence? Do you need the complexity of I'm going to X to buy Y? No, it's mostly understandable through context, right? Is it poetic? No. Is it perfect? No. But it works. So saying something simple in your target language should be fine too. Maybe you can't express all the details of the idea in your head in Japanese, but I bet you can express more than you think if you try and narrow the ideas in your head down to the main point like this, and then express those ideas using only what you already know to be correct Japanese. If you take the earlier idea in our head and ignore the English vocalization we've created and just look at the idea, you may notice that the main point of that idea is purchasing bread. Maybe you could come up with pan wo kao in Japanese, which means will buy bread or buy bread. If you were to translate that literally into English, it doesn't really work out well. But if you've studied just a little Japanese, you know that that sentence, while not perfect, is fine and gets the idea across. Or maybe we know a little extra grammar. Pan mo katte kuru, literally buy bread and come back, which is still simpler than the original English vocalization, but magically way more natural Japanese than the literally translated sentence would have been. But you might never get to that natural Japanese if you just translate your vocalized native language. So the trick is abandon your English vocalization from day one. I don't care if you do the vocalization in English, it's inevitable that you will in the beginning. But ignore it. Ignore everything you just vocalized in your head and look for the essence of that idea. What is the thought that existed in your mind before you vocalized it into English? Find that in your mind and then attempt to express it using only the words and the grammar that you already know. If it's still too hard, try to boil that idea down even more. Then attempt to express that using only the Japanese you've already learned to be correct. If you still can't, then trying some other words you know that might point at that idea somehow can be one approach. Or it might just be time to study or read a little more. I know you want to be able to express everything you can in English in Japanese or whatever language you're learning as fast as possible. I understand that, but it takes time, and translating your English vocalization will slow you down now and forever. Speaking a language and translating are entirely different skills, and you're better off learning to speak correctly before you bother learning to translate. If you start doing what we talked about in this video right from the beginning, you can start thinking in Japanese almost immediately. Get in that habit, and it will make your life much easier. What's more is, if you start thinking about languages in this way, as basically just methods of expressing those wordless mind objects called thoughts and ideas, you'll find that understanding becomes easier as well. Instead of trying to pick up every single word and figuring out what that might mean in your native language, you begin looking for the idea being expressed. You start catching expressions in the new language and becoming able to narrow down what idea or thought they might be representing, instead of what it would be in English. And then you start using those words and grammar to express that idea when it shows up for you. And before you know it, you're doing this naturally, without thinking about it. I'm going to try and come up with some exercises for the members of TokenYandy.com that might help with this. It might take me some time, but I think it's important, so keep an eye out for that if you're a member of the site. Please let me know what your other language learning struggles might be in the comments, and then maybe check out this video.